What's up, everybody? We are back. Well, at least half of us are back. And, well, Scott's been on before. This is the mighty Scott Waters from No Life Till Metal Records. And this is episode 71. And we're going to talk a little bit about something. Speaking of 71, we're going to talk about metal in the 70s. Scott branded this the first wave of heavy metal. And I think it's pretty interesting because there's a little controversy, which of course we're not afraid of here at the Metal Roundtable. But so what's up, Scott? Do you have any how are things, and do you have any shout outs today?
No, I mean things are good. Shout out to Metal Rob, who am filling in for today.
Right on. Metal Rob. He gets really busy this time of year at his regular job, and we all have regular jobs that we have to fulfill a commitment to. But anyway, so I don't know about you, but I got a pile of vinyl sitting next to me, and I know you've got some interesting trinkets, vinyl, magazines, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess I'll start. And in a sec, we're going to talk about metal in the 70s. I think it's fascinating. In fact, we were looking at some of those magazines before we started, and even back then, they were some of the. I used to have a subscription to Circus Magazine and to Hit Parader and to Cream, and they were all touting can metal survive the 70s? And I'm thinking, wait a minute, it barely was starting, and it just was getting going. How dare they say that it couldn't survive? And so I don't know. What do you think about when you think about 70s metal? What are some of the first things that come to your mind?
Well, I understand where the magazines were coming from at the end of the 70s, because bands like, the bands that were popular at the time, like Kiss and Queen and all those bands that were considered heavy metal in the 70s, were moving away from that sound. And then there was a whole new wave, which is why we got the new wave of British heavy metal that came up in 79, 80, that were doing the metal again. But yeah, there was a lot of the bigger bands were moving away from that sound. I mean, even the bands that were still together, like Black Sabbath, were falling apart at the seams at the time. Mm-hmm. So I understand why they thought it might have been the death of heavy metal, but obviously what they weren't watching for was the whole new wave coming from the underground.
Right. Well, and I obviously, when you talk heavy metal, I mean, I guess most people agree that Black Sabbath are the grandfathers of heavy metal. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. I guess that's the popular decision. Yeah, and we had talked about that, but I think we're here to sort of.
Yeah, I mean, there's just no more obvious one than this one.
Right, but I'll tell you what, I heard this for the first time, Deep Purple in rock. And I mean, this thing is a ripper. It's got Black Knight, Speed King, Sweet Child in Time. This thing is heavy, and oh boy, look, see, I love it when we're on the same page. This is actually an original German copy, so that's why it's a white cover. But
not only that, but this one as well.
Man, that's one of the first albums that I ever bought. In fact, it was the third album that I bought, and once again. Hey, look, we can't coordinate this any better. And let me guess, you're going to pull out something like this?
Yeah, see, that's all part of what I call the first wave of British heavy metal. I mean, there couldn't be a new wave of British heavy metal had there not been a first wave of
heavy metal.
So I grabbed this one, but just because I already had this one out.
Okay. Well, and that's not a bad one either. I mean, that was groundbreaking, and it was such a departure from the first record, which was more of a straight up rock record.
Record, but it had hints of what was to come on there. But yeah,
right.
not quite what this was. But the odd thing is a lot of these songs were written before this, at that same time.
Yeah,
they just weren't recorded at that time.
Exactly.
So,
well,
yeah, I mean, you can't. There you got three bands, all English bands that are part of that first wave of British heavy metal.
Okay, well, let's steer away from the Brits, and what do you think about that?
Hang on a second. Roll through here and grab my contribution to that one. I also
okay.
Now I know a lot of people will argue to the death they're just a rock band. They're just a hard rock band. But I don't care, man. I grew up in that era, and we called them heavy metal back in the day. They graced the pages of all the heavy metal magazines. You can look up any heavy metal history book. Martin Popoff's Collector's Guide to Heavy Metal. You're going to find every single AC/DC record in there, and there's a reason for it.
Right. Well, and I think the key to metal, in my opinion, this is just my opinion. If you disagree, of course, that's what the comment section down there is for. But metal is about riffs. And is there anybody more prolific in writing riffs than the AC/DC boys? I think not. And once again, that's what the comments are for. Go ahead and fire away. But
let me rifle off a few more from.
Bring it on. Let's see it.
First wave of British.
Man, this is uncanny, and I promise that we didn't set this up. But,
no, we didn't. Or other than just say, hey, let's do this show.
Yeah, but hey, look at this.
There it is.
Oh, I mean, and I've got something that's kind of unusual. Does anybody have this with a little budgie feather that came with it? I don't know.
But I mean, can you really get in 1974, other than maybe Sabbath, can you really get heavier than In for the Kill or Crash Course in Brain Surgery?
No, probably not. In fact, what heavy metal band covered that one?
Right. Okay.
Man, I can't agree with you more. I think that I think that's what I thought that Blackmore was going for a more melodic direction when he left Purple, but that thing's a heavy record, man.
This is like the beginnings of like both neoclassical and power metal, in my opinion.
I agree. How about this?
That's what I was going to talk to you about. Maybe showing some of the proto metal stuff, and I'll put these other ones down. I got the Britain ones here, but let me grab a couple I have too.
Okay.
See what you think, because I grabbed a few as well. Now, I'm not saying this is heavy metal by any stretch of the imagination. I am saying it's the proto metal, the beginnings of metal, when metal was just beginning, and were the inspiration for other bands, as well as I think this is one we did the only one we did talk about beforehand.
Yeah, we sure did. And guess what? Boom.
Yeah.
And
they weren't. It wasn't so much as they were heavy; they were loud.
Well, they were heavy and loud, but do they not remind you a little bit of?
Yeah.
and the thing is Iron Butterfly was not only heavy, but they had a little melody to them. So once again, you talk about, oh man, I love that record too. Nice Atco pressing. I dig it.
I grabbed both.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is there was really no such thing. And so it was something that they were just trying to, it was an early developing thing.
Here's another one that I would say is no way would I say this is a heavy metal band or heavy metal artist, but to say that he was a huge inspiration for heavy metal.
Boy, I tell you what, I love being on the same page. This is the Japanese Nautilus pressing of that of Band of Gypsies, and Hendrix. I mean, once again, what is metal? It's distortion, it's loud guitar, it's riffs, it's solos. I think that's Jimi Hendrix. Does anybody want to disagree with me? That's what the comments are for.
I didn't show you this magazine, but inside this magazine, I read one of the best descriptions I've ever read of heavy metal, and this was written in 1978. And it's in a magazine from Grooves. Remember Grooves magazine?
Oh yeah, sure do.
It says, stacks of speakers, high voltage amps, deep, thunderous, surging sounds from the bass, screaming lead guitars emitting doomsday warnings, pumped up percussion instruments, and minds being demolished on stage. There is no subtlety in heavy metal. It is the hardest of hard rock, with electric shock treatments and vibrating air churning right before your eyes. And the sledgehammer that powers American heavy metal machine is undeniably Aerosmith.
Oh my gosh. That is funny. Well, then I tell you what, I think it's time to break out the big guns. because I'm going to drop a bomb on everybody that's there. I may get a little grief for this, but it doesn't matter. Have you ever listened to this record?
Yep.
And can anybody deny that Crazy Horses, the album, is or the song itself is heavy metal? This is a heavy metal song on a fairly generic pop rock record.
Yeah.
But you can't deny it. So
I mean,
yeah. So hey, if they're just as heavy as Aerosmith, according to that article.
You could throw in, a song by like the Beatles too. You could throw in, they had several songs that were kind of heavy. I don't know that I'd call them metal, but again, proto metal, no doubt about it. There's a bunch of songs. She's So Heavy is one example right there. It's been covered by several bands. But yeah, I mean, I got a few more from the British wave. Let's see what you think of these.
Okay.
So finish these off. But I mean, there's no denying Michael Schenker.
Man, I had a stack of UFO, and I thought, I know he's probably going to have a stack of UFO, so I went away from it.
I just did a video series on albums that define heavy metal, and I asked 40 different musicians. What one album would you pick that defines heavy metal? And 95% of people chose stuff from the middle 80s. One guy, the guy who sang for Except for one album, David Reese, chose UFO Obsessions, and he had a really good reasoning to the point where he's like, it's got everything. It's got speed metal. It's got the guitar playing. It's got the leads. It's got everything you want from heavy metal. That album has it, and he's right.
Yeah, and once again, I think this is where the Scorpions went away from being more of a radio rock band to an actual heavy metal band. This has got some heavy riffing, and this came at the tail end of the 70s. And as they went into Animal Magnetism and Blackout, those were heavy.
Yeah, but
heavy. Oh, and that Taken by Force is.
I got some wicked glare going on here, but
yeah.
Songs like In Trance. I mean, Yuli Rock is just a beast on the guitar.
I had that in my hand, and I thought, well, Scott certainly has this already in the stack, so I veered away. What do you think of this guy? You think he was sort of heavy metal?
I think that particular album is very good blues-based hard rock. I definitely think by the time he went into the 80s, he was doing his best to play heavy metal. I mean, any of those albums you could pull from the mid-80s. I called it metal back then.
Yeah.
I mean, people will argue till they're blue in the face now that it's not, but I just disagree. I just think metal has progressed and changed, but that doesn't mean the old songs are no longer metal.
Yeah, I pulled that one just because it was from the 70s and not 81, 83. But how about these guys? You ever listen to Atomic Rooster?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yep. Another one of those bands that I've always referred to as proto metal.
Yeah, a precursor to the real deal. I was surprised to find out, and we've already talked about them, but these guys right here, they were tripping around in the 70s and doing fairly fast speed metal type stuff. And I really love Artists. They're one of the few new wave British heavy metal bands that I really dig. What else you got? Hey, right from right here in Fort Worth, Texas, man. Love those guys. In fact, I saw them with it was like a reunion thing with Grand Funk, and it was really cool because they have a similar sound, kind of a keyboard oriented deal, and I don't know, man. I love blood rock. There's some heavy riffing going on there for sure.
DOA is incredibly not only heavy, but it's like, I don't know if the word spiritually heavy or emotionally heavy as well. That's how the whole song is just heavy.
Yeah. Well, here I'm trying to keep it clean on the Metal Round Table, but what do you think about Witchfinder General? Heavy
Absolutely.
band.
Yeah, and then that's a band I always considered second wave, but still, you're right. I mean, it was a. I got one for you. This is a weird one. This is one from 1974, when really they just started using the term heavy metal. I mean, they weren't really using that term, in 68, 69, 70, 71. It was kind of a term that started getting used later on down the road, but This is a
Electrifying. Yeah, I see the Allman Brothers.
Yeah, there's some stuff on here that's definitely not what would we call heavy metal by now. But like I said, this was 74. So you do have stuff on here like Black Sabbath, Alice Cooper, MC5, Jimi Hendrix, Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin. You know, who else is on here that's pretty heavy? But then there's stuff on here that's like, here you go. Look at that one. Would anybody call that heavy metal? The Grateful Dead.
Probably not. Well, speaking of Zeppelin, this is the German pressing of the second album, and I know that there's a long debate, especially from the own band members of Zeppelin that said, "Oh, we're not heavy metal, we're a blues-based rock band." But I'm telling you what, once again, riffs, hot licks, soaring vocals, crushing melodies. They're heavy metal.
But I mean, Black Sabbath said the same thing. They always said they were never a heavy metal band. Now they say they're a heavy metal band. Back then, they argued about it. But you also have to remember something that a lot of newer fans don't remember is the term heavy metal was actually a derogatory term when it first started out. It had nothing to do with you know, it was basically a bunch of noise is what they were trying to say it was.
Right.
So nobody wanted to be labeled that. And the other thing that being labeled heavy metal meant was that, oh, you can only play this style of music. You can only play these kind of songs. And bands like Zeppelin and Sabbath, they didn't just play heavy songs. I mean, they had ballads and they had, I mean, Sabbath had jazz influences and, you know, blues influences and all that stuff was mixed in. That was part of the whole thing in the 70s. It wasn't so confined like it is now where it's death metal and you can only play this, and this is thrash metal and you can only play this. And it wasn't like that.
And you and I have sort of had that discussion about that like jazz fusion stuff where it's sort of a crossover hybrid between rock and jazz where there's a lot of instrumentation. If you listen to like the early Earth demos, which is the precursor to Black Sabbath, basically before they call themselves Black Sabbath, it's super jazzy and proggy and whatever. And so all those influences are there even in their afterlife. In fact, I was at Panther City Vinyl, and shout out to Dan, who's filling in for Ted this week, who's traveling, who hooked me up with the Latin copy of David Lee Roth's "Eat 'Em and Smile." It's kind of fun to hear him sing in Spanish. But speaking of the Van Halen connection, Sammy Hagar in Montrose. Man, this is a heavy son of a gun. This is the German version of the first album, and it's a bad motor scooter, if you know what I mean. In fact, someone had asked where the term heavy metal came from, and I know that there's a band connected to it that someone referred to them as that, and I wasn't sure if it was Mountain or somebody else. I just don't remember who it was, but somehow that term got coined. And
I mean, I've heard different stories. The one that seems most coherent is Steppenwolf using it in Born to Be Wild.
Right. Heavy Metal Thunder. But if you've never listened to Mountain, Flowers of Evil, I mean, that even sounds heavy metal, for crying out loud. But that's a great heavy riff. It's almost a precursor to Doom, and I don't want to steer too far off the path. But
and the other thing I see people argue about metal, and they'll list a bunch of songs that aren't metal from that band, like a band like UFO or the Scorpions, and they'll get something from their very early albums, and they're like, "That's not metal." Well, yeah, it's because there wasn't such a thing, and they were just building up and inventing it. Another band that's like that is, if you go to their first three albums, they were playing like Cream, Jimi Hendrix based,
right,
Irish folk inspired rock, and it wasn't until their fourth album that they started getting that twin guitar attack, which we know and love from heavy metal. And by the time Live and Dangerous came out, we were just had our heads blown off by how heavy this particular record was.
Agreed 100%. Speaking of,
not only the sound, but the look. I mean,
that looks pretty heavy metal.
It is heavy metal.
I think I've seen about every heavy metal bass player in the world do that.
Yeah,
that same code.
Spiked wristbands, the spiked, the leather pants. Yeah, I mean, Phil Lynott he was the rocker.
Yep, Donnell Blair says Blue Cheer, and we've already talked about that right off the bat because that was one of the precursors. Here's one I pulled out of the fire, literally. Witchfind, once again, one of those early proto that has a lot of elements of, and I think we can see where the metal had deviated off into the heavier stuff or to the more melodic stuff, and now it's become so chopped up into a million pieces. What else you got?
Got a few American bands here that they're really, even though we call it the first wave in the 70s, there was really two waves in the 70s, because the first wave came from Britain with bands like Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin and Rainbow and Budgie and all those bands. But by the mid 70s, the US bands had taken over, and they were the ones who were playing all the big festivals, and a lot of the Sabbaths and Zeppelins were falling apart by that time. Right. So then we had these kind of guys who were filling up the stadiums.
Hey, dude, I threw in the Amboy Dukes because if you've never heard this is like a live album, and it's so brutally heavy. But yeah, Terrible Ted. I just listened to the Greatest Gonzos. I found it for super cheap on vinyl, and it sounds great.
I'm a fanatic of Nugent. I literally have like 6 different copies of that live album you just showed.
Yeah. Hey, have you ever heard of these guys? Truth and Janie?
Of course, Janie, yep.
Oh, dude, you want to talk about heavy and squealing, man. These guys are brutal. And this is a reissue, but still excellent heavy riffing.
This is one I've always considered a precursor to what became pop metal in the 80s.
I had an Angel record in my hands too. And greatest logo in music, I think.
No doubt.
You turn it over.
The covers.
The cover is the greatest thing ever. Holy smokes. Yeah, I love that band. I saw them, with Max Webster opening for Rush, All the World's a Stage, and they were fantastic. It was almost like these guys are almost too good for that. And there you go. Oh, that's a cover of Hangover I don't have.
Yeah, this is the Canadian pressing.
Not the lime green version.
Yeah, the lime green version is the U.S. pressing.
Well, speaking of the Canadians, how about that? Any argument?
Nope, none at all. Let's stay on Canada for a while.
Okay.
I grabbed the Canada section, literally.
Oh wow. Well, the thing is that, well, aside from the name and the fact that it's on chrome vinyl and it's kind of a unique thing, the first version had a song called Little Texas Shaker, and so of course everybody in Texas really digs that, and I always look for extra copies of that. But I thought that these, they're always compared to Rush, but these guys were more metal than Rush. I mean, Rush, for as much as I love them and they're fantastic, they're more of a prog band than a metal band, in my opinion. Argue with me down there but these guys are heavy metal. Once again, riffs. Sorry. Oh, there he is. Now that is a heavy record. The first one's a heavy record.
I would say the first 3 to 4 albums are fairly heavy before they really started getting. It was 2112 was where they went all into the prog, which was their fourth studio record. But I mean, the first album very much a Led Zeppelin-esque sort of record. Then they kind of really got their sound on Crest of Steel and then Fly By Night. But yeah, I mean, I would never go into a fight with somebody and say, Rush or heavy metal, but they were definitely one of the harder rocking bands from the 70s.
Well, and our friend Tyler Poppett just popped in with some Frank Marino worship. So guess what? How about the first, Frank Marino Mahogany Rush Maxim? Hey, love it. Oh my gosh, I have one of those too. This is unbelievable. This is way different than when I'm on the air with Rob, because he's so juxtaposed to me. But anyway, yeah. Can I say the White Frank or the White Jimi Hendrix? That's what he was called back in the day. And man, what a spectacular riffing maniac. I just listened to Juggernaut the other day, and once again, he doesn't play all heavy, fast, ripping stuff. He's got some of the greatest ballads type things and some just searing blues. But
if you play an album like Juggernaut, that album is almost just straight up heavy metal. I mean,
yeah, no doubt.
It also depends on the album. Here's another one. This one's a little more obscure, but it is a Canadian band. This one kind of sleazy to me. It kind of has that what turned into sleaze metal and like Dangerous Toys kind of stuff. But
the Hounds.
yep,
They kind of remind me of Bow Wow from Japan. That was kind of tooling around in that same era.
yep.
I like it.
77, 78. So this was kind of towards the end of the first wave there, but still.
Well, I got some super obscurities, and well, we haven't talked about these guys. Sweet.
Nope. And I did. I grabbed it and I put it back.
Yeah. Well, I really dig them. Have you ever heard of? This band, Pipe Dream?
Nope. New one to me.
Yeah, kind of a heavier band. Came out on MPM Records. Really obscure stuff, but very, very cool. But early. How about these guys?
Hard Nuts. That's awesome. Never heard of them.
Yeah,
Martin Popoff said ELP's Tarkus was really heavy for its time too, and it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even a band like Yes had very heavy moments back in the 70s, especially because of Chris Howe's bass playing, and he had that growling Rickenbacker bass. So anyhow, we'll continue with the.
Oh yeah. I checked those guys out. You were right. They're pretty dang good, man.
And they were a power trio that we forgot in our power trio video.
Right. Speaking of power trio, how about this? I'm going to drop this one on you because someone dropped it on me today, and I was like, what the heck am I listening to?
Yep. Great album.
Yep. And the guy sounds a little like Ozzy. But man, what a great album, great power trio, great graphics. Man, really dig this thing. And I've only spun through it once, but really, really cool. How about these guys? You ever heard of these guys? Granicus?
Nope. When I first started spinning, I maybe pulled Cactus, and maybe I should have pulled Cactus.
Oh, Cactus is, well, speaking of Cactus.
Dust, yep.
Yep, heavy. Even the cover. I mean, look at that cover.
Yep, definitely.
Okay.
I got one for you that's not obscure that everybody's going to know, and
yeah, is Motorhead any good? Of course. I had decided no, Donnell, not the Sparks.
This is the box set. This is the box set of their first album, and it has all the different singles and stuff on it.
Yeah, that's cool.
But that was their first official album came out in '78.
Yeah. Well, speaking of first official album, I don't know if you've got a copy of these, the Zero demos by Van Halen.
Yeah, I've got them on CD.
Yeah, this was a Gene Simmons joint, and I think one of their greatest songs that was never released until later. It's called "Let's Get Rockin'," and it later became "Out of Space" on the last album. But here's an interesting pressing from Costa Rica. This is their first album.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Think it's a bootleg or anything? I don't know, but it is from an official release from Costa Rica, as it says on the back. But shoot, I'm almost running out of stuff here.
Here's another band that everybody likes to argue whether they were ever heavy metal or not, but they definitely were considered so in the 70s.
Man, yeah. I mean, they were lumped into that thing. I mean, if Aerosmith was heavy metal back then certainly, if Jethro Tull can win Metal Performance of the Year at the Grammys, then certainly Kiss can pitch in and blow them out of the water.
If you've never heard this, Parasite. If you've heard the song Parasite, I'm sure. That is a freaking heavy song for 1970.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites off that record. Okay, one more obscurity, and then I'm gonna fire.
I love it.
Yeah, that's freaking heavy. And
little proggy on that one, but it's still great. Oh yeah, that's another one. Captain Beyond still got a little bit of that early Deep Purple.
A lot of grit, a lot of bite in that record.
But it's got a little bit of that psychedelic sound still in there. But yeah, I didn't show these, but I might as well show them since we kind of already talked about them. But
yeah,
I mean,
That,
seriously,
that's a ripper, dude. That really is it's relentless. There's really no.
The entire thing is. I
Yeah.
mean, Back in the Saddle's a heavy song. Last Child's a heavy song. Rats in the Cellar is a combination of super heavy songs. Sick as a Dog. Nobody's Fault's friggin' brutal.
Well, Testament covered it, so it must be sort of heavy.
Get the Let Out, Licking a Promise, both heavy songs. The only song that's not is the ballad at the end, which is Home Tonight.
Right.
But really, so is this record. And I know people like to flag on it because it's got, the hits on there. But the Toys in the Attic, the song, was early speed metal. It was a fast, punk-influenced song.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't know how many copies of those two records that I wore out on 8-track, cassette, and vinyl, and still have the original CDs that I bought back in the 80s, 85, something like that, when CD was starting to hit it big. But well, shoot, man, I thought I had a bunch of stuff pulled. What else do you got? We'll just wow. Yeah.
Now, see, the thing about Nazareth is they had these super heavy records like this one, like Razum and Naz and whatnot, but then they had albums in between it. They didn't stay heavy. They were up and down. They get more folksy on some albums, then they get heavy again, then they get folksy again. It was very odd with them.
Yeah, but that one, I mean, look at that thing. That thing looks heavy metal.
And Dan McCafferty's got such a wicked voice.
Yeah.
Just that gravelly, almost growly voice that nobody was really doing at the time, save for maybe Steven Tyler, who had the screech. But
right,
I'm kind of surprised he didn't pull this one or one from this.
Well, I had it in my hand. I just thought I had such a stack that I thought, oh gosh, we wouldn't want to be here for 3 hours.
One of my holy grails that I still don't own it, and I want to own it. There's a promotional record that's split between Aerosmith and Blue Oyster Cult, and on each side it has a picture of the band, and it says New York's heavy metal sound, and it's from '74. I've always wanted that promo record. I've never touched a copy in my life, but it's funny. They weren't really even from New York. Aerosmith wasn't, but that Japanese pressing says it. I got two more. That's it.
And I was just gonna say, if you haven't heard the new one, the new Blue Oyster Cult,
I've heard it.
Man, it's fantastic, and it's heavy, and they've got a third guy singing too. So
they've got a nice variety on the record. It's not a lot of these heavy bands when they come back, a decade later, they come back and they seem like they just want to do the blues, and they put out a boring blues record and nah. All right, anyhow. Back to Canada.
Oh, yes. Moxie. Huge fan.
Yep. And then one more here. This one, I wouldn't call these guys, again, I wouldn't call this band a heavy metal band, but certainly one of the earlier bands playing hard rock and having heavy songs.
Yeah. Hard to argue with First Glance and Harder, Faster, and some of those, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Those are all
like a lot of these bands. I mean, because I've had arguments with people about the whole Aerosmith thing a bazillion times over, and they were like, "Oh yeah, that dude looks like a lady. Does such a heavy song, haha." We're not talking about dude looks like a lady. We're not
combination or Back in the Saddle or
right. It's a different decade. Yeah, I know a lot of the '70s bands moved away from that sound in the '80s, but that doesn't mean what they did back then didn't qualify.
Right.
And that's why I grab these magazines, because I always like to show them, because
those are cool.
People back, I get people who we never even called it heavy metal back then. But yet I've got magazines here. This is some '78 Cream magazine. Is heavy metal dead? So how could something that didn't exist? The media at the time, which is what this is, people proclaiming it's dead. And look at the bands that are out there. I mean, it's Ted Nugent and Aerosmith and Kiss and Queen and Van Halen. Now, I would argue about Boston or even Heart, but
well, I don't know. Heart, Dog and Butterfly. Listen to that thing. That's as heavy as any Zeppelin record. And
that's the thing, is they were very Zeppelin-esque in their sound.
Right.
Here's another one. '78. Can heavy metal survive the '70s?
I don't know if they can or not. Wait, it just did. 40 years later, we're still talking about it.
But yeah, and then one more. I guess you got two more, but one more here. This is actually from 1980, and this is the one I showed you earlier. But heavy metal, it's actually Back from the Dead. Heavy metal. Here Comes the Goon Squad.
Did it ever die? But I guess it must have.
But I mean, listen to the bands: Van Halen, Blue Oyster Cult, Black Sabbath, Joe Perry Project, AC/DC, Def Leppard, Crocus, Lucifer's Friend, Triumph. There you go.
Yeah.
Blackfoot, Iron Horse, The Scorpions, Iron Maiden, Riot, Saxon, and more.
Yep. Well, that sums it right up then.
Yeah, this here was one from 1980 as well. I mean, but you literally have a magazine called Heavy Metal. Zeppelin, AC/DC, Van Halen, all those bands on there.
That was an issue from Cream, wasn't it?
Yes, it is.
Like a spin-off magazine or something, or like a special issue or whatever.
A special edition from Cream. Yeah, it was actually, if you look close, you can see it's the. Man, I got bad glare. The best of Cream.
Oh, I gotcha.
So anyhow, so yeah, if it didn't exist, then well, first of all, if it didn't exist, how can we have a new wave of British heavy metal if we didn't have a first wave of British heavy metal?
Right. Well, that's logic talking, and I know how unlogical the world can be at certain points in time. So, if you were going to pick out your top 3 first wave of heavy metal, what would they be?
Probably Black Sabbath, Master Reality. That would rank right up there as one of my favorites. Aerosmith rocks just because I'm such a huge freaking fan of Aerosmith. I don't know, man. I'm like got a million titles going through my head now.
Yeah, I know. See, that's the thing is that if you live long enough, then you have too much information, and it's hard to come up with something in a hurry.
Yeah, I don't. Maybe like Thin Lizzy Live and Dangerous, just because that's one of my all-time favorite live albums, and that album is so heavy. I mean, it was so heavy for the time.
Yeah, I'm gonna say Sabbath to Black Sabbath. I can't argue that one. Probably Van Halen 2. That's a heavy record. Although the first 2, I guess, honestly, the first 3 albums were kind of recorded in the same session and then just chopped up and produced so they could stay on the road. And then let's see, number 3. Heck, I don't know. It's hard to. Once again, like you say, you get Deep Purple in rock.
That's a great choice.
I mean, there's really no wrong answer. I guess if you, after looking at the stacks that we've just gone through, I don't know that there's any really wrong answer to that question. I was just curious what your temperature is these days.
Yeah, I mean, that Aerosmith album, I still listen to it very regularly. So the same as the first, most of the Sabbath stuff I listen to quite a bit. I just pulled out Heaven and Hell and spun it the other day again.
Yeah, well, and I know that speaking of Aerosmith, I know that that Night in the Ruts wasn't a '70s record, but was it 79? Well, then there you go. If you haven't checked that one out lately, give it a spin because that's a brutal record too.
It is very. It reminds. Its production's different, but it has a feel similar to Rocks in the songwriting.
Very much so. Cheesecake, man, that's one of my favorite tracks. But so anyway, what do you got going on with No Life Till Metal? Anything new coming out? I know we talked about Madrost, and thanks again for Tanner and those guys. I got a couple of tapes from them and got the shirt and I got the CD from you and the sampler and everything. So what else you got cooking at No Life Till Metal?
This is just shipping now. This is the brand new Chris Manning release.
Okay.
Chris Manning is a Texas guitar player. Mm-hmm. Actually, he played with Rob for a while in one of Rob's old bands called Faith Bomb.
Oh, wow.
But this is his solo record. And speaking of Kiss, there's a Kiss member, Bruce Kulick, plays on here a bit. He plays.
Oh, yeah. That's the one he was telling me about. That's cool.
It's really good. It's really good stuff. It's melodic, kind of, I don't know, Dokken meets Alice in Chains. That's kind of how I see it. Kind of has that heavy, grungy feel of Alice in Chains, but it's got the melody, especially in the vocals, of like a Dokken.
Wow, interesting. Well, I'll have to
Very
check
different from
Madrost. Madrost is like hitting your hand with a hammer, and then hitting it again with a hammer. So yeah, I really dig that record. I've been spinning that one kind of like you. I stuck it in the player and I can't get it out of my player because it's just ripping. And there's like point counterpoint. That's what it makes me think of because you've got this speedy, thrashing, brutal, ripping, and then this melody and this atmospheric, almost orchestral feel to it. It's really cool. It's a really cool record.
Yeah, I agree. And that one and the one before are both like that. But the new one's kind of short, but I kind of like it like that because I'm done with it and I'm like, man, I want to hear that again.
Yeah, and then you feel like you have the time to do it.
Right, and I don't get bored with it. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Some albums you can get bored with really easy. So yeah, Madras was awesome. But yeah, that Chris Manning album just came out, so I'm really, really happy with how it came out. It's a fantastic I mean, he's a guitar player, and that's his thing, you know.
Yeah.
Great vocals on it as well.
So Rob didn't guest vocal on there for him or anything, or
yeah. Not at all. It was
too busy with his job.
Rob definitely hooked us up though. He's the one who hooked us up with Chris. So, but we're also talking to another band from Texas, a doom band that you know well of. And we'll see what happens with that one.
Oh boy, can hardly wait. Yeah. Speaking of which, our good buddy John Perez, formerly of Solitude Eternus, is now doing kind of a doomy psychedelic project called Liquid Sound Company with a drummer named Jason Spradlin. Really nice guys, really great songwriters, and a real departure, although you hear those influences still. And I'm still working on the artwork for the cover, but it's going to be a monster. I heard the unmastered scratch. Well, it's an unmastered studio recording of it. It's really brutal. It'll be cool. And I think they're looking to press it on vinyl first and then CD second. But the cover will fold out into a poster. It's going to be really, really cool. Nice. And we'll make sure that you get a copy of that. But anyway,
speaking of Madras, that album is coming out on vinyl too in December.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Colored vinyl, black vinyl, doesn't matter, I guess.
180 gram black vinyl, and there's only going to be 100 copies available.
Okay, well, I guess I'll put in my pre-order like I did with that the other one with Dean Castronova and the boys.
Oh, that's great! Of Gods and Monsters, that's coming out too. That's not on my label, but that is a fantastic album. And Rob Caldwell actually did the mastering for it, and I heard the CD first, and I listened to it several times, and man, this is good. And then I got Rob's files and I listened to what Rob did, and I'm like, wow, this is great.
Yeah.
I don't know what exactly he did, but man, he just made that thing pop.
He has a way about him that he can make those things really, really blow out of the water. I mean, once again, you got to have an ear for it. He seems to have an ear for it because I know he's done a lot of stuff for Deliverance and Tourniquet and some of those other bands. So anyway, well, appreciate you hanging out for a few minutes here.
Enjoyed it.
And, we could probably go for days. We'll see what next week holds. Who knows? You might be back. Depends on how busy Metal Rob is. But anyway, appreciate the support nonetheless and the friendship and so forth. And, well, you know how we end this thing. So you ready to do that?
You know what? I forget how to do it.
I had my daughter on last week, and I don't know if you saw that, but she had to kind of nudge me and say, how does that thing go at the end? And it's just 3 words, metal will prevail, and then we sign off. So you ready?
All right.
Metal will prevail.